Welcome back to the Vanessa G Fitcast. I'm Vanessa Pozos, and here with me is my lovely co-host and husband, Mr. Omar Pozos.
What's up, everybody?
Today we're recording our first episode in our new house.
Our new, if you guys have seen, what is it? The Barbie movie is like the Mojo Dojo Casa House. Isn't that what Ken calls it?
Definitely not the Mojo Dojo, whatever.
I need a fur coat for the people watching on the YouTube channel.
Yeah, no, we're not going down that path. No. But I'm really excited, although we have yet to figure out where we're actually going to be recording our podcast.
We're still in the kitchen, you guys.
Unfortunately, we're still in the kitchen, still rocking and rolling the kitchen recording studio. But it's a bigger kitchen, so can't be mad about that.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. I know I've asked you a couple times, but that we've been here for, 4 or 5 days now?
Yeah.
What has been the one thing that you're most excited about in the new house?
Oh, having my own office, for sure.
Yeah, that is cool.
We used to share an office, and that was terrible.
It wasn't terrible. I liked sharing it with you, but
you liked it because I always gave it to you because you would take calls and I would just leave and go and work from the kitchen.
We would switch up every once in a while. But yeah, Vanessa and I would share offices, and obviously when I was on calls and she was on calls, like it just didn't work, so it was a nightmare. But yeah, having the two offices is cool. Obviously the backyard for Zoe, our dog, is fantastic. It's just good to be able to like have more space, if anything, you know?
Absolutely. Really happy just to be in an actual house.
And
home.
The location is awesome because we have so many restaurants to pick from and a yoga place right down the street from us. I mean, we should have moved probably a year ago, to be totally honest with you.
I know. Well, what's funny is that if I had tried to move down here, let's say like 5 years ago, I would have almost thought it was a bad thing that we're surrounded by so many restaurants. I would have been like, oh my gosh, this is like going to be a trigger. I'm going to feel like I need to eat out all the time and I can't eat out. Eating out is bad. You know, I can't have all these foods because at the time I was completely consumed with food rules.
Yeah.
I would follow all these different types of rules of like, you know, you can't eat carbs outside of your workouts. You shouldn't eat past XYZ time of night. Like no going for ice cream later at night. Eat processed foods, only eat whole foods, you know, read the ingredient list and don't eat anything that you can't pronounce. Like so many food rules that I subscribed to for a period of time. And those food rules just consumed my life and it really made things more difficult than it should have. And the reason I first started falling into food rules was because I'm the type of person, I like structure. Obviously, you know this of like moving in with me just from the beginning. Like I've always liked organization and structure. But I think that
you're like the Marie Kondo of the fitness world, I guess, because we've got all the bins, we've got everything very neatly organized. I appreciate it. I really do. I think it's awesome.
Yeah. Does it bring you joy?
It does bring me joy. Why do you say it like that?
That's the Marie Kondo line.
Oh,
does
is that what
bring
she
you joy?
Does it bring you joy?
Yeah.
Yes,
But,
it does bring me joy.
Yes, all that to say, I like structure. My brain operates well off of having set kind of bright lines to follow. And so that's where it's very easy for me to fall into the traps of these types of food rules because then it simplifies things of like, okay, you know, it's very black and white. You can't eat this, you can't eat that. But eventually, if you continue down that path, you're going to start to inevitably feel restricted. You're going to end up in this inherent just rule breaking. Rules eventually lead to rule breaking. And when we start to break rules, we start to feel guilty. We start to feel shameful. And those feelings end up spiraling into this guilt shame cycle to where now you're overeating, undereating, overeating, undereating. And before long, your metabolism is just destroyed. You have a terrible relationship with food and you're not in a good place. So really all that to say, I'm so glad that today I don't subscribe to those types of food rules. And
you're
we
a
can
rule
actually
breaker now.
Yeah. But we can actually enjoy all the awesome food around us.
Yeah.
Like, you know, the first weekend we moved in here, we already hit like some of our favorite restaurants. But I do want to share, and that's why I decided to do this podcast episode today, is I want to share what are the food rules that you should actually follow. And although I'm saying food rules because I think it's easy for people to understand, I don't really consider these food rules. They're more so guidelines. They're more
habits, right? If anything,
they're habits. They're really just eating guidelines to essentially follow. And these are really, really helpful to follow because, I mean, for myself, they've absolutely changed my life. They've changed my relationship with food to where now I can, you know, have like the pizza and ice cream that we had on Sunday night, but not have that food and end up binge eating and end up feeling guilty and, just going down that bad cycle to where now Monday morning I feel gross and I need to undereat to make up for it. Like we had the pizza and ice cream, and then Monday morning I still felt great, which was amazing.
Yeah. I think for me, my biggest, I guess, rule, if you so want to call it that, was, no junk during Monday through Friday, and then Saturday, Sunday was an all out, right? Eat whatever you want, drink whatever you want, and just basically eat like a jerk, for lack of a better word. And I think that's really what has, like you said, it really led me down a path to where I was constantly thinking about my next meal on Monday through Friday. I was like, all right, Wednesday's here. I'm like, if I can only get through Thursday and Friday, and then, Friday night I can have margaritas, tacos, and then start with brunch, mimosas the next day, and so on and so forth until Sunday. That's what just kept me in this cycle of, one, losing, regaining the same weight over and over, but two, again, it's this vicious cycle of like, you're constantly thinking, what am I going to have for lunch? What am I going to have for breakfast? What am I going to have for dinner? Or at the same time, it's like you're eating breakfast. You're like, oh, what's lunch going to be? Or, is somebody bringing, I don't know, Susie bringing cupcakes, muffins, cookies to work? Like, I need to have them because I can't have them any other day, right? So I think, like you said, having a little bit of structure, a little bit of just guidelines that help you, like, okay, I know this helps me feel my best. I know this helps me fuel my body the best that I can. I think that's what I've really started to prescribe to, and it has made a world of difference, like you mentioned. And it's that concept of, it's not a rule. I mean, you're a grown person. I'm a grown person. Sometimes I act like a child, but I am a grown adult. You can have pizza whenever you want. You can have burgers, cupcakes, whatever you want at any given point. You do, DoorDash, Grubhub, Uber Eats, you can literally have it within minutes. So it's not that you can't have it. It's more so, how is it going to make you feel? And, what are your intentions behind having these things? If that makes any sense,
Yeah, exactly.
Man, I just kind of went on like a crazy rant today. I felt the new house is just helping me settle in.
The Mojo Dojo Casa
House of Omar.
Really helping you step into your podcaster.
Exactly.
Well, let's dive in. So I want to share 7 food rules or 7 eating guidelines, we can more so call them. And these eating guidelines really come from the teachings of Geneen Roth. So she's an excellent author, has written several books around emotional eating, binge eating, around just eating behaviors and developing a healthy relationship with food. So definitely recommend picking some of those up. But let's go ahead and dive into this list. So the first eating guideline, the first food rule that you should actually follow is eat when you are hungry. Sounds very simple, right? People are like, well, yeah, no duh, I'm hungry, I'm going to eat. But so many people are trapped in this place where they almost fear hunger. They think that feeling hungry is a bad thing. And I see this a lot as we start to reset women's metabolisms. So often women are telling me things like, oh, I'm just not hungry in the mornings. I just don't really want to eat breakfast. I just don't feel hungry very often. And then as we start to build their metabolism up, now they start to notice some hunger signals start to kick in. And at first they might be like, oh my gosh, this is bad. I'm starting to notice myself feeling hungry. Like, what if I get hungrier and hungrier? What's going to happen? Am I just going to eat too much food and now start to gain weight? And we have to kind of talk them through and help them understand that having hunger signals is a good thing. We want your body to start to actually communicate. We want your systems to actually communicate with your brain of when you are satisfied, when you are hungry, when you need fuel, when you don't. And that comes via your body's really intelligent, innate hunger cues. So in order to start to reestablish those hunger cues and to actually build trust with yourself that you will actually follow those hunger cues and you won't just completely ignore your hunger cues and start to starve yourself and then start to lead to a slower metabolism, we have to listen and we have to respond when we are hungry. And when I'm talking about hungry, I'm talking about true hunger. Like, I call this like body hunger, not mind hungry, not bored hungry. Yeah. Not a feeling hungry, like a stress hungry or something along those lines. It is like a true feeling within your body that might feel like an emptiness in your stomach or a little bit of like a growling sensation, or it might even feel just like a low energy. It might even feel like a little bit of like a headache. It can show up differently at different times, but this is actually a physical sensation in your body communicating to you that it's time for some fuel.
Yeah. Now, something you mentioned, Vanessa, that I think was so interesting that I kind of want to pick your brain and not go off on too much of a tangent is, why do you think people fear hunger? Like, why do you think people are afraid of eating? Like, what do you think where do you think that comes from?
Well, I think it just stems from, we've all been like raised essentially to fear the idea of gaining weight and to fear having a bigger body, to fear, being larger. And it's always been communicated to us that if you eat, you will gain weight. If you have too many calories, you will gain weight. And so then that starts to become this extreme level where now people are thinking, okay, well, if I'm hungry, then I will eat. And if I eat, then I will gain weight. And they don't understand that there's a certain level that leads to the weight gain. It's not just, oh, I'm eating, now I'm going to gain weight. And so people start to fear that signal because they think, okay, well, if I'm never hungry, then that's a great thing. Like if I'm taking an appetite suppressant and I never feel hungry, then I'm not going to eat. And then I'm going to just magically get skinny. And people don't really realize that that's not necessarily the full story. That's not really how it's going to happen. Your body needs fuel. Your body needs nutrients in order to have a healthy metabolism, healthy hormones, and just a healthy life.
Yeah. I was just thinking when you were saying that, I just spoke with somebody maybe yesterday or 2 days ago, and she's doing intermittent fasting. And that's one of the things. She's like, I can't eat, I think it's like 16 hours on, 8 hours off, whatever that is. And she's like, I can't eat anything till like 5, 6 o'clock at night. She's like, so when I do, I'm like ravenous. She's like, and I just eat everything and anything. She's like, but throughout the day, she's like, I am hungry. I'm starving. She's like, but I know that I can't eat, so I restrict myself. I don't eat. And therefore I'm constantly thinking about food. I'm constantly thinking about, when is that time to eat? And it's just such a cyclical, problem, right? Because it's like every single day you're thinking about the same thing over and over. And she's like, I'm just exhausted of literally thinking about food all the time. And I was like, well, maybe it's not the approach for you because clearly, this is not sustainable. It's not a way to live. And she's like, yeah, you're right. And we were just chatting about that. But yeah, I was just curious at your thoughts on that stuff. Because
that's just a great example in general because
thank you. I appreciate that.
You're so great.
I know.
But when people are doing these types of intermittent fasting approaches, while intermittent fasting in and of itself isn't necessarily bad, but most people misuse it and use it incorrectly. And that's an example of using it incorrectly to where now this woman is essentially training her body to ignore her natural hunger cues. So what's happening is during those
hormones like ghrelin or something?
Yeah, ghrelin and leptin are your hunger hormones. So essentially, during those 16 hours that she is fasting, she's not eating, she's going to be getting sensations in her body that, hey, I want food. Hey, I'm hungry. Hey, I need some fuel. But she's pushing past those feelings. She's ignoring those things. And now she's starting to essentially activate, neural pathways that are teaching her body that, okay, when I'm hungry, I'm not necessarily going to listen to that feeling. So then it's okay. Now let's make that hunger signal louder. Let's make it louder. But now, magically I've crossed over into that 8-hour feeding window. So now what's going to happen during that window? Boom, she's going to overeat. She's going to not even listen to her satiety signals either. She's not going to listen to her fullness cues because she wasn't listening to her hunger cues before. Now it's a mental thing of I can eat, therefore I will eat, and I will eat a lot. Yeah. And that's where it can become a very unhealthy cycle, a very unhealthy relationship with food.
Yeah, no, I agree. Let's skip 2 and 3 because I feel personally attacked by these, shall we?
Yeah, so let's do number 2. Is eat sitting down. Yes. Tell us, Omar, why do you feel personally attacked?
Well, I don't do this. No, and I think I've shared this before, but I grew up working in the food and beverage industry, and I think a lot of people have that same, work or busy lifestyle. We've got a ton of moms that listen to us. We've got a ton of busy women that are on the go, right? And it's hard to take a moment to sit down and just be focused, be present in what you're doing. So that's my problem. I'm always, either between calls eating or, sometimes I'm like, I need to get to the gym. I need to do X, Y, Z. Like I'm always prioritizing other things when I could take, and I know this very well, like I can take 10, 15 minutes and it's not going to make or break my day. But I just have such a hard time sitting down because I've always just been so trained. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's a habit that's like ingrained in me so deeply that we might need to sit down and figure this out.
Yeah, we're going to have eating sitting down therapy for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's really not even just about, okay, sit down rather than standing. It's really about taking time to eat in a calm environment where you're really focused on your food. So that's essentially meaning of like, okay, instead of eating on the go in the car, eating like as I'm walking around, eating between meetings or eating on meetings, it's let's sit down, eat our food and actually focus on our food. And I can tell you, like when I really subscribe to this idea because, there was a period of time where I was like you, I would say in my early 20s.
I like how it's like, like you.
When I was
cool?
Wrong and messed up and weird. When I was in my early 20s, and I remember one of my first jobs was very fast paced, and I would often eat, in meetings or eat while walking to the office or while walking back from the office. Like I would really try and multitask to make the most of my time. But I also found that when I actually learned this food rule and I started to actually sit down to eat my meals and focus on my food, I started to just completely change my digestion, for one, because if you're actually sitting down, you're in a calm environment, you're going to help your body shift into a different state of your nervous system, which is called the rest and digest state. As opposed to if you're up, standing, moving around, focusing on other things, you're putting yourself into a fight or flight state, which means that blood flow is going to be going to your limbs, going to your extremities. It's not going to be in your gut, in your GI tract, helping you digest your food. So that's where you might find that afterwards you're more bloated. Afterwards, maybe you're, more gassy. Like you might just feel more uncomfortable because you're actually not digesting your food well as you're eating it. But the other reason that this is a really, really helpful thing to do is it's going to absolutely change your satiety level. So when you are actually sitting down, you're relaxed, you're focused on your food, you're going to be able to notice your hunger and fullness cues more easily. Whereas if you're multitasking, you're standing up, you're moving around, it's going to be harder for you to pick up on when you're actually full. And you're probably just going to eat until you're, there's no more food there, not until your body's communicating to you of like, okay, I'm satisfied, I'm done, I don't need more.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
It's a very important one to lean into.
Yeah. And it's something I think that personally, like I need to train, right? Because you're right. Like I'll put something on the bowl and I'm like, I can't get out of here. I can't stop eating until it's done, even though like I might be stuffed, but I never allow myself to have that couple of minutes to be like, oh, like, am I still hungry? Am I not still hungry? Like, no, I'm like, I just need to, sometimes I feel like Zoe, when we feed her in the morning, she's just like, wow, like ravenous all over her bowl. Like that's how I feel sometimes, which is not a good place to be.
Well, it flows right into number 3, which is eat without distractions. So it's really along the same line here.
Yep.
Of like I was saying, we want to eat sitting down in a calm environment, but it's also important to eat without distractions. And I think this is the one that most of us are most guilty of. So obviously you said you felt personally attacked. Even myself, this is something that I struggle with probably the most often.
I mean, on Sunday when we were eating pizza, we were watching Suits, right? And shout out to Harvey Specter, my favorite character. But yeah, that's the thing. You just get so zoned in and you have 1, 2, 3 slices, whatever. And then you're like, oh, like I'm just, eating, and you continue to watch TV, but you're not paying attention to, again, are you hungry? Like, are you satisfied? Are you, what is going on? You
can really only have your attention on one thing at a time. So it's like if you are watching TV or you are reading a book or you are listening to a podcast. Although, of course, if you want to listen to our podcast while you eat, it's not a big deal, but, maybe consider not doing it. If you're on the phone, if you are, there's so many different things that we could be doing that can be distracting.
Watching kids, working, sending emails, a lot of those stuff.
And, of course, there is a level of it's not always going to be realistic for every single meal to be completely focused on your food. If you are a stay-at-home mom and you need to watch your kids, obviously, watch your kids, of course, but do what you can to limit other distractions. Instead of also being scrolling on your phone and, looking at what's on Instagram, just actually focus on your food while also watching your kid at the same time.
Yeah. So what you're saying is just be present in what you're doing, essentially.
Exactly,
right?
Exactly. And again, this is also going to lead to more satiety. It's going to help with digestion. It's all about helping your body shift into that more parasympathetic rest and digest state, which is going to help in so many ways. Mm-hmm. So absolutely. Definitely. And the other one I wanted to add there too, in terms of distractions, ones that we forget often to mention. So in terms of distractions, we're all usually talking about the TV, being on your phone, scrolling, talking on the phone, things like that. But it's also important to not be in a really heated conversation or an anxiety-fueled conversation. So,
ooh, I never thought about that.
If you are somebody that maybe you're awesome about not having those more traditional types of distractions, but you sit down to eat with family or friends or work colleagues or different things, and normally maybe those are very relaxing meals that you enjoy, and that's a great thing. It's important to foster conversation and community and allow food to be a tool within that. But if you find yourself in a heated conversation, maybe you're sitting down at the dinner table with your husband and things, you're having some relationship troubles, and this is not, he's giving me a look
I was
here.
like, where are we going with this,
He's
babe?
giving me a look. This is not a personal example. But I'm just saying, I know this.
But if hypothetically we were, this is how we would go down.
No, but I know this is relevant for some people that,
Yeah.
that they might be in that case. Well, it's important to maybe consider just focus on the conversation itself, even though it's a little bit more heated and a little bit more anxiety inducing, and maybe just let your food sit and then wait until you shift into more of that relaxed state. You're going to notice when your heart rate is lower, when your breathing is much more just like deeper and slower, and you just feel that more relaxed sensation, then go back to your food. We don't want to be eating food in a really stressed state because that's going to majorly affect your digestion.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I sometimes when I'll call my mom or I'm trying to eat something and I get frustrated or I get mad or whatever is going on.
I feel like that's 80% of the conversations that you have with your mom.
I know. Well, I'm right all the time and she just doesn't get it, you know? I'm just kidding. But yes, I do see that for sure.
All right, well, let's move on to number 4. So that is eat what your body really wants. And although this isn't necessarily in the traditional kind of food guidelines that Geneen has taught, I also add and needs. I think this is an important distinction of eating what your body really wants and what it actually needs. So what I mean by that is, in terms of eating what your body really wants, we want to make sure that you are actually honoring your cravings, honoring your desires for food, and building trust within yourself that when you want something, you can actually have it, that there's nothing off limits, that there are no food rules, and so that you can actually start to feel free. You can start to feel like you aren't restricted, because when we are restricted, that's what tends to lead to overeating and eventually actually binge eating, which is a very, very unhealthy position to be in.
Yeah. What is that saying? It's like what you resist persists or something.
Exactly.
Did I make that up? No, I don't think so. But yeah, that is the saying.
So if you are telling yourself like that, you want this food, but you're like, you're having these thoughts come up, the little voice in your head is saying, oh, no, don't eat that. That food is bad. You should eat something else. Like you should eat the healthier thing, or you shouldn't eat that because it's not healthy. Like those kinds of shoulds and shouldn'ts, that little voice, we just need to tame that voice, say, it's okay. Like, I understand that you're just trying to protect me. I understand that this is, something that I've been taught over time, and I have this voice now coming up, but I don't have to listen to you. I am craving this pizza. I can have this pizza. And when you start to build that trust within yourself, then when you go to eat the pizza, it doesn't feel like something that's off limits and that you need to eat the entire pizza to feel satisfied, because you're like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to allow myself to eat this again. So I need to just eat past the point of fullness. Instead, really honor your cravings and listen to it. Now, the other aspect to this that I mentioned of it's not just eat what your body really wants, but also eat what your body really needs. So something that we really like to teach at VGFN is pairing these types of more indulgent foods, the more of like the treat foods, with other foods that are providing our body with the nutrients that it actually needs. So if you are having the pizza, you might be aware that, okay, this pizza has a little bit more carbs and fats because of the, the crust on the pizza and the cheese and the oils on it. Like, I know I'm getting plenty of carbohydrates and dietary fat. Now I know that I'm missing a protein source here. So you might want to add a side salad with some grilled chicken on it, or something else to provide yourself with that nutrition. I actually, was thinking even, so one of our coaches on our team at VGFN, Kat, she was actually sharing.
Coach Kat. Shout out to Coach Kat.
Yeah, shout out to Coach Kat. She shared a really good example of this on her story the other day. So she's currently expecting. And so obviously, if you've been pregnant before, you know that pregnancy cravings can be more intense. And so she's done a really awesome job of sharing examples of how she honors these cravings that she has, but she also is still providing her body with the nutrients it needs in growing a little human. So like, for example, the other day she shared how she was really craving donuts. So her fiance went out and got some donuts, and I
think he got up at like 5 or 6 a.m. Like he was first in line to get her
beat the line. He was probably pretty excited about her cravings. But so, she had posted her picture on Instagram of how she had, looked like she had half of each of the 2 donuts that she wanted. And then she paired it with a protein shake on the side. Yeah. And that was to essentially allow herself to have the food that she wanted, to indulge in that craving and satisfy that craving and build that trust with herself that she can have those things. They're not off limits, but also pairing a protein shake to make sure that she's also stabilizing her blood sugar. She's not having a big blood sugar spike and crash by just eating the donut alone. So that's where it's important to honor your cravings, but also acquire knowledge around nutrition so that you can pair it together and make sure that you're giving your body what it needs as well.
And think of it this way. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, right? We've got 365 days a year. If you eat 3 meals a day, you've got 3 meals a day. So one meal, one day out of 365 or out of the whole year is not going to make or break anybody. And I'm talking top professional athletes, bodybuilders, CrossFitters, anybody out there, and I can guarantee they will say the same thing. It's not going to make or break you, right? So if you truly are in a position where you're like, I really want this pizza or this donut or whatever it is that you want, there's no point of you restricting yourself, because then you're going to want it more. And when you do get the chance to have it, you're going to eat 3-4 times as much, just because you haven't had it, in a while, or because you think that you can't have it again the next day or the day after that, whatever that looks like, right? So when you zoom out a little bit and you put things into perspective, you're like, oh, one day out of 365, like, of course it's not going to make or break me, right? But when you're in the moment, you feel like this is your last meal, ever. And it's so easy for us to overeat, so easy for us to zoom out and see the big picture. So that's why I think it's so hard to do. But when you zoom out and you actually take a moment to, like you said, really analyze what's going on, you're like, oh, no big deal. I can have the donut. I can have it. And like you said, when you pair it with other things that help you stay satiated, that help you stay full a little bit longer, then it just becomes a normal, breakfast or a normal lunch or whatever, you decide to have it with, if that makes any sense.
Exactly. It's
about
not
balance, really.
Absolutely. And, number 4, which was eat what your body really wants, flows really well into number 5, which is eat until you are satisfied. So I think that's why a lot of people start to feel concern over, like, oh my gosh, I can't allow myself to have these foods. I've never allowed myself to honor my cravings before. How can I do that without overeating? That's where tying in this next guideline, eat until you're satisfied, can help you start to develop that trust with yourself of, oh, I can have this food. I can have the donut. I can have the pizza. I can have whatever it is that I desire. And I can trust myself that I can actually listen to my body's cues and stop eating when I am satisfied. And notice that satisfaction is different from fullness. So it does take practice to actually find the difference, because physical fullness can actually sometimes come at the point of you being overly
uncomfortable.
Yeah, well, it might not necessarily even be like a physical uncomfortability, but sometimes because it is a slower, it's like a delayed response to where your gut actually sends the hormones to your brain communicating that, hey, I am satisfied, I've had enough, I have the nutrients that I need right now. We might not actually have that communication in our brain until a little bit later. So sometimes we just keep eating, we eat too fast, and then now we're like, oh, I've actually eaten too much.
Got it. Yeah, I see your point.
So understanding what it feels like to feel satiated is really, really important. And I personally like to teach our clients the hunger scale and actually help them understand where they are in the hunger scale before they're eating, during the meal, after the meal, and start to familiarize yourself with that so that you can learn your body and you can learn your own body's different communication systems, because it is going to be different from, one person to the next. And I think we can just move right on to number 6.
You looked at me, I was like, I've got nothing to add on this, but you crushed it.
Number 6, the 6 food guideline here, eating guideline, food rule, however we want to refer to it, is eat with intention of being in full view of others.
Ooh, I like that one.
So this one is really, really important too. If you have a history of binge eating, if you have a history of just overeating, undereating, being stuck in that cycle, you might find that you have this like instinct to where you don't want to eat big meals in front of people, or you don't want to even, maybe if you're on the extreme side of it, you might not want to eat in front of people at all. And I completely understand, because I've been there myself. When I struggled with binge eating disorder, I often would avoid eating in front of other people. And if I was eating a meal with others, if I went out to eat with somebody, if I was just, sharing a meal with friends or other people, I would typically eat a smaller portion. I would order a smaller meal at the restaurant. I would eat not very much in front of people, but then I would go home afterwards and I would privately eat more food because I was still hungry. Yeah. And so that's where then I would actually eat a lot more, overeat, potentially maybe even binge eat the whole, roll of Oreos, whatever it was that I was wanting at the time, and I would not be listening to my hunger cues. And so this is this unhealthy cycle that a lot of women get stuck in, where they now are hiding, they don't want to eat in front of others. And the only way to really work through that is to work through it, to actually practice this, to actually challenge yourself to eat not necessarily just in front of other people, but with the intention of eating in front of other people. So even if you are eating your meal solo, you're listening to our other guidelines here. Now you're sitting down, you're eating without distractions, but maybe you are alone, you are privately eating your food. And in the past, that might've been something where now you're going to overeat because you're alone. And that's like a trigger for you. Now eat as if others are there with you and really find that balance of, okay, I can still eat as much as I need to eat to find that point of satiety, to honor my cravings, to follow all these food guidelines we've taught so far. And it doesn't matter that I'm alone. It doesn't matter if there's other people here. I can truly lean into this and actually just eat what my body wants, what my body needs, and eat until satiety and trust myself in that.
Yeah, I like that word of honoring your body and honoring, your satiety, honoring how you're going to feel, because I think that's ultimately what it comes down to. And obviously, I've never really dealt with a lot of binge eating tendencies, but I've had some binge eating patterns or, I guess close to tendencies. But you feel like crap as soon as you do it, right? And you start to regret it. So it's more so like, how do I want to feel, honoring that I guess those feelings that will probably help you the most.
100%. Thinking about how you want to feel after the meal and keeping that front of mind is really, really important.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that brings us to number 7, our last food guideline, our last food rule that you actually should follow. And this one's probably the most important of all. And that is eat with enjoyment and pleasure. Now, this one is so often forgotten, and I think a lot of women would find this one unexpected in terms of like when we're talking about food rules and different things, but this is so important. You should actually be enjoying your meals, and you should actually love to eat, and you should allow yourself to love food. There's nothing wrong with loving food. There's nothing shameful about loving food, although it has in our at least from my generation, I feel like we were raised in a way where if you were like, oh yeah, she loves food, like that's an insult.
Yeah.
But nowadays, I think women are feeling more comfortable with embracing that, hey, I love food. I love to go out to eat. I love all these different things. And we can allow ourselves to feel that way. And we can allow ourselves to even identify that way and still have a healthy, lean body that we want because we're following all these food guidelines. We're really finding what our bodies need. We're giving our body the nutrients it needs. We're actually doing the things we need to do to find that balance, like you mentioned before.
Yeah, and I think like one important thing to remember, like especially when it comes to food and stuff like this, like it doesn't matter who you are or what you're going through or what sort of relationship you have with food. Like you still have to eat every single day, right? It's not like with addiction, like you just don't drink alcohol, you don't take that drug or anything like that. You still have to eat. You still have to nourish your body. So it's so important for you to really, like you said, enjoy the food that you are eating, but also the experiences that come along with it. I mean, I love to cook. I don't have the time to do as much cooking as I would like, but there's just something so cool, especially as we're approaching, Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas. It's about the memories. It's about the experience. It's about just the time that you spend, whether it's with friends or family. But I mean, it's finding that enjoyment with it, right? Because at the end of the day, you still have to be able to eat every single day to nourish your body, right? So we have to find that good balance. And I come back to that word balance of being happy, being, I guess joyful and just enjoying what you're doing, but also, again, honoring your body and working towards the goals that you do have at the end of the day.
Absolutely. I love it. Well said. Well, I think we can...
Dun. The Mojo Dojo Casa House, man. I'm telling you. Making me a great podcaster.
We're not doing that.
All right, fair.
Well, I hope that you enjoyed this episode. I hope this was valuable for somebody out there. And if it was, please do us a favor. Share it with a friend. Give it to somebody else who you think could also find value from this and just spread it forward. So thank you so much for listening. We'll be back next week.
See you guys.